Hi YouTube, it's Kathy and this is my August 2020 reading wrap-up. If you're not already aware, I do weekly entertainment wrap-ups of everything I read, watch, and listen to, but today we're just talking about the books. This month I participated in the Read-A-thon and I also did my first ever book blog tour video thing, so I will link all of that down below in case you missed it. I'm going to start with the nerdy, hardcore stats and charts and then get into what I read. In August, I read 18 books for a total of 5,053 pages. That takes into account converting audiobook minutes to pages, so 1,778 of those pages were actually about 56 hours of audio. The age breakdown for these books was 12 adult books, 4 YA books, and 2 middle grade books. I read 15 novels, 2 graphic novels, and 1 anthology. This month my reading was all over the place, with contemporary, nonfiction, and mystery thriller being the biggest pieces of the pie, followed by historical fiction, poetry, classics, smut, fantasy, and science fiction. If you adjust by page count, you realize the poetry was short and the smut was long. This month, half of my reads came from the library, but I also read some books on Kindle, from a friend, from Life's Library, or that I already owned, got for free, got from the publisher, or got from the author. I read 7 audiobooks, 5 ebooks, 4 paperbacks, and 2 hardcovers. Half of these books were in the 300 to 399 pages range, and most of them were published in the last decade, but I did have a few older titles. More than half of these authors were female, with some male and non-binary authors as well. The protagonist genders, however, were binary, although mostly female, with a few books that didn't have protagonists, hence the not applicable category. In terms of setting, half of these titles took place in the United States, nearly a quarter in Canada, and other titles in the UK, Denmark, Barbados, and other worlds. In terms of diversity, over half either had a combination of diversity or none at all, and then I had reads focused on queer content, race, or feminism. In terms of star ratings, this month I had 1 3-star book, 3 3.5-star books, 7 4-star books, 3 4.5-star books, and 4 5-star books. Let's start with the lowest rated read and work our way up to the highest, shall we? My 3-star read for the month was Space Struck by Paige Lewis. This was a poetry collection, and poetry is just not my thing. This wasn't bad, this wasn't especially good, although there were a couple of different lines that I really liked. I didn't feel like I was understanding most of what was going on, and that is a me problem, not a poetry problem, hence why I got a 3-star rating, which is not bad, not good, not terrible, it's just a 3-star book. I know about myself that I don't really seem to understand how to critique and read poetry, but I keep trying it just in case I find something that I can really connect to. On to my 3.5-star reads, the first one I read for the Read-A-thon, and that is They Call Me George. This is about the black train porters in Canada. This is a part of Canadian history I knew nothing about. Unfortunately, this book overall was structured in a very weird way, and unless I'm misremembering, the reason for the title wasn't actually even explained in the book. I think it's explained like in the synopsis on the back of the book, but it's not explained in the book itself, which is that racist white people would just call every train porter George because they were too lazy to memorize names. Or, you know, read a name tag. We like to think of Canada as that place that people from the States escaped to and they were free and that's great, but really it wasn't a land of opportunity for black folk that came here. If you were black and male, basically your option was to work as a train porter and you would never work up. You could work there for 30 years and you would still be at the bottom of the ladder, and if you did anything wrong you could go down to auxiliary hours, and it was just nonsense. It was terrible, but I am very happy that I now know this piece of Canadian history. I love when the sun is super inconsistent because it makes editing my videos fun. Speaking of fun, my next read was Fun Home by Alison Bechdel. This is a graphic novel that is also a memoir about her family and her growing up, and her coming out as queer and then realizing soon after that her father is queer, and mostly dealing with his death. This graphic novel is incredibly dense in that there is so much to look at in every single panel, and there are a lot of words in most panels as well, so it got to the point where I would start skipping the panels I knew I didn't really have to read because I just wanted to get through and know this story. Since I've read this, I found out that there is also a musical, so I would like to see that at some point. And this did have an aspect of bibliophilia to it because he taught English. Alison Bechdel, I believe, also has some form of English degree. So there were references in here I got, there were some references in here I didn't get because I didn't read those classics, but this was enjoyable overall. It was just a little bit too dense for my tastes. Next we have Washington Black, which is a historical fiction about an enslaved boy on a sugar plantation in Barbados who is taken away from that situation through Some plot, let's just go with that. I don't want to give too much of it away. Essentially, the master at the plantation at which he is enslaved dies, and the next person to come in is very cruel, but his brother is a naturalist, so Washington ends up basically being his body man, and being enslaved directly to him to help him do his experiments and that type of thing. The events of this book take up over a decade of this boy's life, so we get to see him grow up and understand some things about his family that he didn't understand before, and just there is a lot of history in this. There's also a lot of travel in this. It's an epic and obviously has trigger warnings for white supremacy and abuse of black people and so many other things, because this definitely has its violent points. However, his life is not without hope and joy, and I appreciated that. On my 4-star reads, the first one being Always Human. This one was a reread for me because I read this as a webcomic and then I had to read it again for a blog tour. That video is going up on Thursday, so wait for that. That's a reading vlog of me reading the book version of this webcomic, but essentially it takes place between these two characters who meet on a subway platform and form a relationship. It is sweet. This book isn't a perfect analogy for a person with disabilities dating a person without disabilities, but it tries to do that. It does cover a lot of topics that would come up in that type of relationship, and I appreciate it for that. Next, I buddy read Number the Stars by Lois Lowry. This is a book that takes place in Denmark during the Second World War and has a lot of history I didn't know about the occupation of Denmark. For example, I didn't know that at that point Denmark still had a king. I also didn't know that the population of Jewish people in Denmark at the time was about 8,000 people, and they managed to get most of those people out of Denmark before they were rounded up by the Nazis. This is a book from the point of view of a 10-year-old girl whose family is helping to save Jewish people, and I thought this was wonderful. There were points in this where I thought to myself, this seems like a very convenient thing that would happen for a plot for a book like this, but the author did so much research into it and actually had an author's note at the end being like, hey, this thing, which I'm not going to say because spoilers, seems like it's just something I threw in there to make the plot easier on myself, but this is something that actually happened. I loved learning, so I loved delving into this history, and I loved finding out that Lois Lowry actually took the photo of the girl on the front of this book. Just an extra little bit of history. An even older book I read this month was Anne of Green Gables. I hadn't read this since I was a child, back in about 1997, so it was a time to revisit it during the Read-A-thon when we were meant to read a Canadian children's classic. I actually read the exact same copy that I read back in 1997, which my grandparents got me on a trip to Prince Edward Island, which is where this book takes place. I know there was a Netflix series remake recently. There was also the TV miniseries from about the 90s that people might be familiar with, so you probably have heard of the tale of Anne of Green Gables before. It's about this orphan girl who goes to live with an elderly brother and sister on Prince Edward Island. They wanted a boy so that he could help out on the farm, but there was some miscommunication, so they got this overly verbose little girl. I don't exactly know what to do with her at the beginning, which is fair because I am super introverted, and if I had to listen to Anne talking all the time, I don't know how well it would go over. She also has a knack for getting herself into trouble even when she's not trying to do anything badly, and it's a fun time. Being that this was published in 1908, it is not free of problematic content, but it had far less than I thought it would. So yay! Speaking of problematic content, let's move on to the smut I read this month, which was Harvest of Sighs, which is the third in the Thornchapel series. I originally thought I was not going to complete this series because of what happened at the end of the second book. I buddy read the first book with my friend Jean and we really liked it, and the second book came out basically as we were finishing it, so we figured we would buddy read that one as well. Obviously we were upset with what happens at the end, no spoilers. And basically we just wanted to see the world burn and see if the character that needed some comeuppance was going to get it in this book. One of the most striking things for me is the first 20% of this book had more sex in it than the previous two books combined, which was just a lot for me. I guess it makes sense because we know these characters, we understand their relationships to an extent, and it makes sense in the terms of what the series is. But I spent way too much time being like, why are these characters not mad at this character for what this character did? It was basically only the victim of that character who was vocally upset about it. And I was just like, really? Seriously? The hell? There is a fourth book coming out. I believe it's coming out in October. I'm going to read it just to get through it because now I feel like I'm pot committed to it. That's a poker term from my poker days. However, I don't think Jean will be joining me on the rest of that journey because she DNF'd this book. The problem is the writing is enjoyable and I've come to really care for most of these characters, but what some of them are doing infuriates me. This series also has kind of a magic, occultish twist to it, and I would kind of like to see how that mystery plays out. Another book with occult vibes is The Lost Coast by Amy Rose Capetta. This is about a girl who is magically called to a small town in California because this group of witches has a member that is missing. One of the interesting things about this book is the various different perspectives you get. Sometimes you'll get the perspectives of the ravens in town, sometimes the entire collective consciousness of high school students, sometimes just a couple of members of the Greys and we'll see something from their past. And often Danny, our protagonist, will be the perspective. Danny doesn't know before she gets here that she has magic, she just knows there's something different about her, and the Greys help her figure out what that is so that she can find their friend. In the beginning, this was incredibly slow-paced for me, and that makes it sound like I didn't enjoy it. I was enjoying it. However, I enjoyed it a lot more when we were getting to the end and the action was really moving. This was full of lush descriptions and interesting dynamics and very enjoyable magic once we really got to it. So if you're looking for something with witchy, autumnal vibes, this is one to pick up. Similarly, a book with a lot of characters and a lot of perspectives is The Break by Katherena Vermette. Most of the perspectives in this book are people who are Indigenous or Métis, and this is really about an entire community and a tragedy that happens in it. This book starts out with Stella, who is up one night because her baby is crying and she sees something horrific happening outside of her house. She calls the cops, but it takes them a very long time to show up, and when they get there, they don't really believe her story of what was happening. Her husband comes home from an overnight shift, and he, a white man, also doesn't really believe her, basically says, you could have been sleep deprived. Maybe you thought you saw more than actually happened, and this has nothing to do with us, you should just calm down and forget about it. We also get to see the perspective of the victim of that offense, several people that know that victim, whether or not they're family members, best friend, that type of thing, as well as who perpetrated that offense, and we eventually find out not exactly why, because there's no excuse for it, but there's many revelations throughout this book, let's just put it that way. This is really a study of characters and how they're interconnected, and even if you forget who is related to who and exactly how, as I often did throughout the book, you understand that this really is a community. Because of the violent content, this isn't the type of book that you can say that you enjoy, but whatever the equivalent word for appreciating a book like this is, I did that. Speaking of violent acts, I also read 8 Perfect Murders. This is about a man who works in a bookstore, and one day an FBI agent comes in and says, do you remember writing this blog post many, many years ago about 8 books you believe have perfect murders? And he kind of thinks to himself, he's like, yeah, I think that was one of the first ones I wrote ages ago. Why do you ask? This FBI agent thinks that there's somebody who's using the method of these murders to cover up the fact that they are murdering a bunch of people. Firstly, this was a great mystery, which is enough to get me interested, but then it is also bibliophilic because not only does he work in a bookstore, not only does he have this list of 8 perfect murders, but we're talking about these different murder mystery books, and it does spoil the plot for some of them. I wasn't overly upset about what I learned about certain books because I wasn't about to go out and read the ABC murders anytime soon anyway. But if you're the type of person that cares about those types of spoilers, I would look up which books are featured on his list and read them before reading this book if you're worried about spoilers. This had some twists to it that I definitely appreciated. My lighting got really dramatic for this section and I'm kind of into it. And apparently this is the beginning in a series, which I didn't think was a thing when I finished it, but that's what Goodreads says, so who knows what else we're gonna get about this character. On to my 4.5 star reads, the first one being the legendary Shiver. This is about a girl who moves into a small town, meets this boy who's our protagonist, and they immediately become best friends. It's senior year, and she figures that after senior year, she is moving to New York or Los Angeles, I can't remember now. It's either New York or Los Angeles, I cannot remember for the life of me, but she's like, I'm going to move there, I'm going to become a singer, I'm going to make it big, and he basically decides that since he wants to leave his small town anyway, he's going to follow her. This becomes a study in her career and fame and what people have to do to be accepted into the music industry world and the different things that can happen to you when people think that they own you. It is New York she goes to, but she ends up spending a lot of time in Los Angeles as well. Just wanted to clarify that. This book discusses fame, passion, unending love, talent, drive, celebration, music, drag, world travel. It's all in this book. There are content warnings for sexual violence as well as discussions of sexual violence toward a minor, just in case you need to know about that going into this book. Our next book is also powerful, but a little bit more lighthearted, and that's You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson. This is about a high school senior who finds out that she didn't get the scholarship she needs to attend the school of her dreams, but her town treats prom like a sport, and whoever wins prom king and prom queen gets a scholarship, so she decides she's going to enter, even though she's a wallflower and she's got a lot of work to do if she's going to win. Our protagonist is black and has to deal with some racist bullshit while trying to run for prom queen. She is also bi, so she has to deal with some biphobia from her friends of all people, but also from the fact that she can't be really open about that because then she's not going to be elected, which sucks because she's got a crush on this new girl and they date, and if it's found out, that could be a problem for her. This does discuss tough topics, but spends a lot of time also being cute and sweet and lovely, and I love how certain aspects of it came full circle. It was just really good. I highly suggest reading it. Another book with a black female protagonist that had to deal with a bunch of bullshit was Such a Fun Age by Kiley Reid. Our protagonist is a nanny to a white family, and one night they call her when she's out with her friends saying that they need help because somebody has smashed a window and they just want to get it cleaned up and deal with the police without their child being there, and can she come and take the child for a little while? And she says, sure, why not? They're paying double. That's great. So she goes and she basically takes the child to the supermarket so they can look at things until she's called back, and people at the supermarket don't like the idea of a small white child with a big black woman, and security is called on her. We must be nearing the end of the list because my camera battery is about to die. One moment, you're probably gonna change a little bit. Essentially, once this situation is cleared up, our protagonist just wants to forget about this experience. However, white people have opinions and feel like they need to be heard. There was a white guy at the scene that filmed the incident and sent her a copy of it in case she ends up wanting to do something with it, and then deletes it off his phone. She ends up seeing him again a little later in the plot, so we get more of his whole deal. And then the mother of the family she nannies for is a piece of work. Let's just say that. I don't want to go too much more into it because I think that you should just read it and see the levels of manipulation and absolute nonsense that happen, because oh my goodness, I wanted to throw the book. Next, we're onto my 5-star reads for the month, and anytime I do a reread that is a 5-star, I always put it at the beginning of my 5 stars, so something I've just read has a chance of being my favorite for the month. That means the first 5-star book I have to talk about is Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas, which actually comes out tomorrow. I originally read this book back in March, and then I read it again this month because I did my first ever full review of a book, which is linked down below. If for some reason this is the first time you're ever hearing about this book, let me just give you some bullet points as to why it's wonderful. We have a trans male lead, we have a magic system, we have a ghost love interest, we have this sassy cousin who doubles as a best friend who is just wonderful. We have a strong tie to community and family and found friends, and I just love this book, obviously. If you want to know more, go to that full review because I had a lot of fun making it. My next 5-star book is White Fragility by DiAngelo. This is an anti-racism book that is full of very important information. I find it important when I'm really delving into a topic to read more than one book on the subject, because even though there will be overlaps between books, there will oftentimes be sections of books that explain something in a way that a different book didn't and makes it click with me a little bit more, or has information that the other book didn't have whatsoever and really deepens my understanding. This is a difficult type of book to talk about in a wrap-up because I don't want any people of color who are watching my wrap-up to have to feel uncomfortable about this white person talking about anti-racism, which is important. White people should be talking about anti-racism, but I also don't want to trigger anyone by discussing any of the topics that particularly stood out for me. That means I will simply say I consider myself a lifelong learner. I will want to continue to learn over time, and if anyone else is looking for a resource for this specific vein of knowledge, this is a very good one. My penultimate read on this list is a memoir called We Have Always Been Here. This is about a woman who was born in Pakistan, whose family eventually moved to Canada as refugees, and the various things that happened throughout her life. The author is both queer and Muslim and has had life experiences that I can't even dream about having myself. So I found this very informational, and her life story had an impact on me. If you want to read a memoir about religious persecution or intense family dynamics or refugees in Canada, this is one to pick up. My favorite book this month was also a very dark read, but this one is fictional, and that is Hideous Beauty by William Hussey. The author actually sent me this book out of the goodness of his heart. It took a little while to get here from the UK, but that's okay because I think that it was well worth the wait. Going into this, I knew that this was a dark, queer, YA mystery of some sort, and honestly, that's all I needed to know going into it. This book is about Dylan and Ellis. Ellis is out and proud, whereas Dylan is still in the closet, and there's a circumstance that makes him have to come out to his family and his community. I didn't know any of the major plot points going into this book, and I would like everybody else to be able to go into this book without the major plot points as well, because many of them had me reeling and I was just completely sucked into this book and I needed to know what was going to happen next. This is also the second book I've ever seen that had a content warning page at the beginning of it, which is very, very important because there are some very dark topics that are discussed and happen in this book. I would also like to briefly mention Dylan's best friend Mike, who is just a wonderful human being and going through his own stuff, because as Dylan came out to him as being queer, Mike came out to Dylan as having leukemia. So both of these friends are dealing with some very big life events, and there is just so much in this book. It's also told in a very interesting way because we bounce back and forth between now and the past kind of gets closer and closer to where we started now, and I just really enjoyed it, and I'm having a hard time talking about it without giving anything away. I love these boys, I love this story, there are definitely the dark bits, so check that trigger warnings page, but I want everyone to read this because I really loved it. If you want to hear me talk more about these books, or other books for that matter, the link for my weekly entertainment playlist is always listed down below. Have you read any of these books and what did you think about them? Let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving a comment but want to make sure that I know you were here, just leave me an emoji or a smiley face if you're on your keyboard. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this channel, and there is. I recently set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. That is listed down below, as well as my PayPal and my Amazon wishlist in case you want to send me a book. You can like and share this video as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!